From June to October 2022, Pakistan was hit by devastating floods. Heavier than usual monsoon rains and melting glaciers that followed a severe heat wave caused immeasurable loss of life and displaced millions. Extreme weather events like this are linked to climate change. A Sufi singer-songwriter and acousmatic composer combined traditional storytelling with poetry and sculpted with environmental sounds to create a music project that brings climate awareness and action forward.
I'm an Alberta-based Sufi singer-songwriter and acousmatic composer, and I recently released my debut album, Mannat. I also have a doctorate in music from the University of Alberta, and I have served as a music faculty for a semester at CE Spring 2020 Voyage. My artistic practice involves sculpting with sounds of the environment as well as sounds of cultural heritage, particularly South Asian Muslim heritage from where I come. You could say that my music falls under the umbrella of combining soundscape composition with South Asian classical as well as South Asian folk music traditions.
Wow. That's really, really cool. And I'll definitely want to talk about that a little bit more, but first things in order, congratulations. Received the Women in Music Honors Roll Award in Emerging Voices 2023. So I guess just how are you feeling about that?
Thank you so much. When I was nominated for this award, I was already all over the moon and went to Toronto for the award ceremony, and oh my goodness, I could not expect that I would receive this amazing award. And we shared that with 10 other emerging voices from across Canada. So it was kind of really, really fabulous. So Women in Music did their inaugural honors roll series this year, and they had different categories. International Leaders Award and Emerging Voices Award and Excellence in Live Performance and so forth. So people at different stages of their careers in music were recognized. There was an Artist of the Year award as well. Within the Emerging Voices, because of the international impact of my music album Mannat, I was recognized as part of that award. So I'm extremely honored. It is it's a very humbling kind of an experience, and I'm still processing it, to be honest.
Well, of course. When it's so hard sometimes when you're recognized for something so big, you sometimes forget. You're like, oh yeah, I did do something really cool, but because there's so many times where we're like, no, I'm just myself. I'm just doing my little old thing. Why would people even want to listen to this? So your album, you're talking about combining cultural aspects to naturalistic sounds. So what can you tell me about your album and kind of the process of it?
Mannat is based on a concept of prayer and offering that devotees in South Asia bring to a shrine, a Sufi shrine. Mannat is a prayer or wish that is asked from a saint. And I kind of brought that concept in the realm of climate justice, as you might be aware that in 2022, my country of origin, Pakistan, witnessed one of the most catastrophic floods in its history, and about 33 million people were displaced, including 16 million children. So it was a very devastating thing that the country is still recovering from, and we don't know where the future takes us. So the poetry in this album is based on Sufi poetry, and it's a kind of a prayer. It's a prayer for people who have been displaced, and at the same time, the album itself is dedicated to the victims of flood, and all the proceedings from the album going to the flood victims. So the sung poetry in this album comes from 2 to 3 different traditions. One is Sindhi Kafi, and the other is Shajurak, and these are different styles of singing Sufi poetry that I've learned from master musicians in Pakistan, and I've combined these with soundscape recordings that I collected in 2020, when my city of birth, Karachi, was going through devastating floods, and thousands of families were displaced. So I began to compose Perils of Heavy Rainfall then, and that became the foremost composition that led to the album Mannat. Within the album, we also have songs that are my original lyric and music, Living with Purpose and Anticipating. And most of the music was recorded in Edmonton studios in Alberta and Edmonton, with two musicians, an Iranian santoor player, Mehdi Razania, and an Indian-Canadian tabla player, Ojas Joshi. And then there were algoza. Algoza is a traditional musical instrument in Sindh region of Pakistan, and those were contributed by son of a legendary player, Khamisu Khan. His name is Akbar Khamisu Khan, and he contributed those pieces. And my originals were recorded in Toronto with a Nigerian-Canadian guitarist and talking drum player, Kunle. So this is the breadth of how the album came together. The pieces were mainly mixed in Karachi as well as in Canada.
So a real collaborative effort to bring it together, so many different people. And I really appreciate artists like yourself, and I have another one I talked to a while back, Noreen Braun, that take climate issues and tie it directly into a project. Because as we're seeing in the world, things are starting to escalate in terms of the climate disasters, and there are so many countries that are going to be affected by it. So continuing to get these messages out, changing the public consciousness, the zeitgeist of society towards being aware of this and challenging our governments and corporations, I think is so important. So thank you so much on taking an effort and really caring about things that are happening in the world.
Thanks for giving me the space to talk about it. I would also like to add that some of the soundscape compositions in Mannat that combine soundscapes, sounds of the environment with traditional poetry as well as storytelling, try to bring forward an aspect of climate action and justice that's not given its due priority, which is the kind of displacement, the impact of displacement and impact of climate crisis on the refugees that are people whose homes have been completely drowned and they're totally displaced from their places. And living in refugee camps, these places are more vulnerable spaces for women in particular and girls in particular. So some of the pieces in my album, especially Displacement and the Great Calamity, sheds visibility on girls and women who are being impacted by climate catastrophe and because of increased insecurity as a result of homelessness.
The most vulnerable of our societies are going to be the affected the most as things continue to develop and escalate. So yeah, it's important to be aware of it and inspire others, because I know for myself, sometimes it can get really easy to get into that doomer mentality of what's the point? Everything's too far gone anyways. But no, we can make a difference and we can help people's lives, because the floods in Pakistan, as well as the droughts that took place over the summer in China, are just some of the major things we're starting to see. So we need to continue to be aware and get together and fight for each other. So you mentioned talking about the Sufi people. So who are they? What can you tell me about your culture?
So Sufis represent an esoteric approach to Islamic belief and practice. And in the essential way, their way is to return to the divine source from where everything has originated by following a path that emphasizes introspection and learning and knowing from the heart. So what Sufis describe is as zauq, or tasting, and it refers to opening and nurturing your inner senses so that you're able to experience the divine light. So many Sufi groups place a significant emphasis on sama, which means listening. And there are elaborate Sufi gatherings that involve reciting and listening to poetry and played with musical instruments and with chanting the name of Allah and with movement. And these practices are an ascetic way to nurture the heart in ways that only divine is reflected in it. So in my context, the ways that as an ethnomusicologist, I have worked with a Sufi community in Bhidsha at the shrine of Shah Abdul Latif Bidai. But throughout my journey growing up in Pakistan, I found Sufi poetry, even that which was kind of popularized on national media, or, you could find internationally, like the music of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and so forth. It had a deep impact on me as growing up as a woman. That music emphasizes looking for love within yourself. And it is such an empowering concept that, while pursuing, a journey, a life path that is almost kind of non-conventional in my cultural settings, women are not usually encouraged to pursue performing arts, and particularly not music or dancing. And pursuing this as a central way and kind of deviating from the norm, it requires courage. It requires one to find love and strength and acceptance and belonging, within yourself, so that you can create that within the wider world, right? So I find that Sufi poetry is very empowering for me, and I seek to share that experience of empowerment through my music with other people.
That's really cool. Stepping out of the norms, being someone who is setting the path for others, because you'll be an inspiration to other women and girls out there who may be thinking, do I want to pursue a career in music or the performing arts? And then they see you and they hear your story and they're like, yes, I can do it too. So one thing that stood out to me when you're talking before was saying an ethnomusicologist. I don't think I've ever heard that term before. Is that what you went to school for?
That's right. I was studying ethnomusicology. It means studying music in its cultural context. So studying music not as a musical notation or, just the composer and their intention, but rather studying the entire culture from where this music emerges and the meaning it has for its listeners. So really, it's kind of can be summarized as anthropology of music, because you're studying the musical culture and musical context.
I mean, music is so integrated within like human culture, human society, and just human development in general, right? Like it's basically been a thing around as long as humans have been, basically.
Absolutely. Music has been a part of human culture since the origin.
So when you're kind of studying the different music and like the cultural connotations behind it and the influences, what was a moment that really stood out during your education?
For me, there was once a conference going on, Heavenly Garden Conference at the University of Alberta. I happened to raise a question and bring forward a point that became really an aha moment for myself as well as for the other listeners. And that was about growing up in Pakistan. I was a part of an Islamic soundscape where I would be listening to the call to prayer, adhan, 5 times a day. And that is how my ears were tuned to the environment. A similar experience that people describe in the context here is listening to church bells. That was part of the traditional soundscapes before it was taken over by the traffic noise and so forth. So listening to call to prayer was part of my soundscape, which has completely when I moved to when I was growing up, I didn't like it because it meant that if you're playing music, you have to stop the music and you have to conform to Islamic norms. And I was more of a nonconformist type. So many people would kind of resent that, they have to stop their usual activities just to pay respect to the call to prayer. But being an adult and growing up, and being in an environment now where I don't hear call to prayer at all 5 times a day, I find that I kind of miss that soundscape. And for me, that was an aha moment, that how our cultural upbringing and our enculturation in a particular setting influences how we listen to our environment.
Your whole approach to music is so interesting and fascinating to me, kind of how you dissect things and you look at it from almost, yeah, like an analytical or at least a research kind of focused base.
Absolutely. I think that's part of my training in ethnomusicology. My analytical lens has kind of developed, and I would certainly acknowledge my mentor, Professor Regula Bukat Qureshi, who nurtured my mind and gave me that rigor during the course of my study at the University of Alberta.
So when someone is listening to your pieces, what are you hoping to invoke inside of them?
With the pieces that I recently composed, Perils of Heavy Rainfall, Displacement, and The Great Calamity, I was headed was to bring the traditional repertoire in the present day context, so that the listener doesn't just look at these pieces as classical. They see its relevance and how these pieces are speaking to us in our current realities. So Displacement, for example, it's kind of the traditional poetry is the first part of the poem is a prayer to help me overcome my sufferings, alleviate my sufferings. And the second part of the poem is about service to these religious figures, but in a broad sense, you could consider it service to humanity. So these traditional pieces are preceded by a soundscape part, which brings attention to the calamity that's going on in Pakistan with regards to floods and homelessness, and a mother crying out for her girl, 3-year-old girl that went missing, making, and anchoring these traditional poetry and music to that mother's cry for her missing girl, alleviate my suffering, service, we need to take action to alleviate this crisis. So I want the listeners to be able to relate to the climate calamity, the human condition, its impact, and the need for action through the sounds of the heritage. And that's my intention, to be able to not see climate calamity only in terms of these big news bulletin headlines or statistics, through the voices of the people who are being impacted and through experiencing what's really going on. The piece, The Great Calamity, for example, brings to perspective a family that is moving through the water, through the flood waters to reach dry land. And it's from young girl's perspective about what lies ahead of her. How are things going to be? Everything gone. And the poetry is about, it's Bertie Bear means a great calamity, that a great calamity has, my home is confronted with that, and it's a prayer to alleviate the suffering that's going to be there. So I would like the listener to be able to relate with both the poetry of the heritage and with the condition of the people who are experiencing suffering at this point as a result of climate crisis.
Projects like Manat are so important because it helps take us back and show us how impactful music can be in everything, that it really is art. Because sometimes you can easily forget the amount of thought, time, the efforts that can go into creating a piece in kind of the oversaturated market that we're seeing, like, just out of the United States with, like, the top 10 hits. Not to say that there isn't thought or time put into those works, but a project like this, that you are really thinking about how it affects the world, how you can influence someone and tell that story beyond just, oh, let's get that catchy tune that sticks in someone's brain like a brain worm, but so I can really appreciate a piece that is just thought-provoking and I guess, yeah, just art in every aspect of the word.
Yeah, I agree that, even in terms of like my pieces were 10 minutes long, so they didn't get featured in any Spotify playlist. They did in the regional playlists, like Alberta Music featured it in their 2022's most significant albums of the year or something like that. And it did come in the playlisters that I personally knew, but by and large, if I contacted any playlisters, they didn't want to play my music, saying that it doesn't fit in their genre, it's too long, I created an entire social media post on the kind of feedback I got from Spotify playlisters on the track Displacement, and none of them wanted to, like, there was a zero placement. There were like 30 feedbacks and none of them were able to put it on their playlist, and they had this very interesting feedback. So I totally find that the media, social media, and Spotify, and these can be kind of restrictive at some levels.
Do you have any other projects that you have in the works?
Yeah, I have some new projects. I'm working as an artist in residence at Trico Changemaker Studio and the International Association for Arts for Social Change, where I'm doing work on climate action and community engaged music projects focusing on climate action within Alberta. And this is one of the works that I'm doing as part of these two residencies. I'm also working on a musical. A part of it is done, but it's an adaptation of a folktale from a feminist standpoint. Also, I'm composing a newer version of a poem that I wrote called Living with Purpose. Part of that song is already out, but I'm redoing it with all the verses in that poem. It's kind of important for me, as well as it was nominated for the Alberta Magazine Awards in Poetry last year. So I want to be able to sing all the verses at some point, and I hope to present these works soon.
I'm really looking forward to it. So where can people go to find your album, Manat, or your project, as well as where can they go to find out more information about yourself?
Yeah, so I have a website and it's very simple. It's my first name, last name.com, shumailahemani.com. And those are also my social media handles on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. You can find me at Shumaila Hemani. And on Facebook, I'm called at Oak Tree Acousmatic. So these are some of the ways of finding me, and I'll be launching a Patreon soon as well. So that would be a way to support my work.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.